in Isaiah chapter 10. Isaiah chapter 10. And I actually am kind of excited about this because I have no idea what I'm going to say either. So this for me is, I'm in the same position you're in. This is an adventure. But I tested it out on Patricia a couple of nights ago, and she liked the idea. But then she's pretty biased, so who knows. In the 10th chapter of Isaiah, I want you to drop down to verse 5. And I want you to look at the opening statement in that verse and ask yourself if that is not a strange statement. Woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger. Is that not a strange statement? If Assyria is functioning as an instrument of God, why is condemnation pronounced upon Assyria? Woe is an onomatopoetic transliteration of a Hebrew expression, wai. Hoi! It speaks of calamity, massive judgment. How can a people come under divine denunciation and judgment while at the same time functioning as a rod of God's anger? That is an instrument of God. The rest of the verse says that Assyria will be the staff in whose hands is my indignation. Assyria, this pagan, godless, idolatrous nation, is the instrument of divine judgment. And on whom? On godless Israel. In fact, verse 6 says, I send it against a godless nation, namely Israel. Actually, Judah, southern part of the kingdom, and commission it against the people of my fury. The Jews are now designated as the people of the fury of God. God is furious with Israel. He is livid with their unbelief. He holds them fully responsible for their disbelief, fully responsible for their idolatry, fully responsible for their rebellion and their rejection of Him and His word and His worship. And He commissions the Assyrians to come against them, notice verse 6, to capture booty and to seize plunder, and to trample them down like mud in the streets. That's pretty strong language. Now here you have a divine decree. Here you have divine sovereignty in action. God, as it were, grabs Assyria by the nape of its national neck and says, you will be my instrument of fury against the godless people of Israel who have rejected and rebelled against me. And then in verse 7 he says, and this turns a corner, yet it, meaning Assyria, does not so intend, nor does it plan so in its heart. Assyria is the instrument of God's judgment and is clueless about that. That is not Assyria's purpose. That is not Assyria's motive. That is not Assyria's intention. They have no interest in the God of Israel. They do not believe in the God of Israel. They are sure that they have no connection to the God of Israel. They have no intention, no plan to act as Jehovah's agent. What is their purpose? Rather, it plans or purposes in its own heart to cut off many nations. This is just another opportunity for the Assyrian power to knock off another neighboring nation. They've already done it to Calno and Carchemish and Hamath and Arpad and Samaria and Damascus. Their hands, verse 10, have already reached to the kingdoms of the idols, whose graven images were greater than those of Jerusalem and Samaria. And all Assyria knows is, look, we knocked off all the other nations who in their judgment had greater divine protection, greater gods than the gods of Israel. They must be greater than the gods of Israel because they had already conquered the northern kingdom. They had no intention of being agents of Jehovah. They were just going to do to everybody left in the vicinity what they had done to all the rest. That was their only motive. They thought they were acting completely independently. They were certainly acting in a godless way. They were certainly acting in a vicious way, in a wicked way, in an evil way, in a murderous way. But if, in fact, they are the instrument of divine wrath, does that not somehow exonerate them from responsibility for what they've done? If this is divine decree that brings them in, if this is the divine power of God, which is irresistible, that grabs them and brings them toward Jerusalem and Judah to bring destruction, if this is the work of God, then what culpability do they have? Can they resist it? And yet in verse 12, this is an amazing turn here. So it will be that when the Lord has completed all his work on Mount Zion, when he has finished using Assyria as an instrument of his fury, he will say, I will punish the fruit of the arrogant heart of the king of Assyria and the pomp of his haughtiness. As soon as I'm through using them, I'm going to turn on them and punish them for their sins. The very act that they carried out under divine decree was an act of evil that reached such a high level that God turned on them and brought on them destruction. In a very strange way, perhaps a way you've never thought of it before, they bear full culpability, full responsibility for every evil intent, every evil motive, every evil action, every murderous act, every part of that slaughter and that destruction. They will be guilty before God for every bit of it, even though they are functioning within a divine decree. And not only did God pronounce judgment on them for the deeds, but for the motives behind the deeds. Look what it says there. I will punish, verse 12, the fruit of the arrogant heart. I will punish them for the acts, which is the fruit, but also for the arrogant heart of the king of Assyria and the pomp of his haughtiness. For he has said, the power of my hand and by my wisdom I did this. Wow, is that amazing? He will punish them for their acts. He will punish them for their motives, and he will double punish them for a failure to recognize the glory of God, taking credit for what they had done. They think they've done it by the power of their hands and the wisdom of their own design. They say, for I have understanding. I removed the boundaries of the people and plundered their treasures. And like a mighty man, I brought down their inhabitants. So proclaims the king of Assyria. And my hand reached to the riches of the people like a nest. As one gathers abandoned eggs, I gathered all the earth. And there was not one that flapped its wing or opened its beak or chirped. I just went in there and just raided the nests without protest. God says, I'm coming after them for that. I'm coming after them for that motive, for that haughtiness, for that pride. Is the axe, verse 15, to boast itself over the one who chops with it? Is that not strange? It's God who's wielding Assyria like an axe to chop down Judah and Jerusalem, and yet God holds the axe head responsible. Is the saw to exalt itself over the one who wields it? That would be like a club wielding those who lift it, or like a rod lifting him who is not wood. Therefore the Lord, the God of hosts, will send a wasting disease among his stout warriors, and under his glory a fire will be kindled like a burning flame, and the light of Israel will become a fire, and his Holy One a flame. And it will burn and devour his thorns and his briars in a single day, and he will destroy the glory of his forest and of his fruitful garden, both soul and body. It will be as when a sick man wastes away. It's another way to look at the juxtapositioning of divine sovereignty, divine decrees, and human responsibility, to see it in this negative sense. It's very important for us to understand that though God controls by divine decree and divine sovereign power everything that goes on in the world to his own purposes and his own intents, that does not remove one iota of culpability from those who do evil. They will be judged by God both for the act and the motive and the failure to give him glory and to worship him. By the way, Scripture doesn't say any more in Isaiah about how we resolve that. Doesn't say any more.